welcome back to the show. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hi.
Where's Christian?
I don't know, where's Christian?
She's on vacation with her husband for their anniversary.
Oh, they went down somewhere warm.
Yeah.
Punta Cana.
What anniversary was it? It's a big one, I think. I think it's a big one.
I don't know.
I don't remember. Anyway, Christian's not here, so it's just Skye and I. And Skye Jethani.
Hi.
Hey, that's a new shirt?
No, I got this in India last year. It's got the Nehru collar.
Yeah.
You see that?
Well, it's kind of new.
Well, it's a year old.
Okay.
But that's not.
Have you worn it on the podcast before?
That I don't know.
It's new to us.
There you go.
It's new.
It's kind of warm, so I don't wear it in the summer usually.
Oh, okay. Well, why would they sell it in India? Where is it cool? Is it cool enough in India to wear it?
Yeah.
India hot?
Have you heard of the Himalayas?
What is it?
Big mountain range.
Yeah?
Sir Edmund Hillary, all that.
Yeah, that's in Tibet.
Yeah, but the Himalayas, their foothills are in India.
So they make warm shirts for the
That's where the
foothills?
the waters of the Ganges are sourced in the Himalayas.
Oh.
The holy river.
Oh.
Where you put all the corpses.
What?
Huh?
Me?
Yeah. They put dead people into the river.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. We got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Skye.
Hi.
And not Christian, too, because she's not here. She's somewhere with her husband having an anniversary or two. You can't really have two anniversaries at the same time, can you? But you could celebrate multiple anniversaries by lumping them all together into one big trip. Hey, it's a podcast. You can hold that thought. Still in here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Thank you to all the people who wrote in and told us which Cheers character they were and what color they were wearing.
Right.
That was fun.
It was.
That was enjoyable.
I wonder if somebody stumbled on your Facebook page and thought, what on earth are they talking about?
Yeah, this is weird.
Yeah.
Someone told us that they were wearing magenta pajamas.
I couldn't sleep if I had magenta pajamas on. Too bright.
I don't think your wife could sleep if you had magenta pajamas on. I wanted to talk briefly about the Colorado Springs shooting at the Planned Parenthood on Friday. Was that on Friday?
I think so.
Friday. It's because we don't know a ton about the guy who did it, but it's already.
I think his mugshot pretty much says it all.
If you've seen his mugshot, he doesn't look all there. So obviously it's a tragedy, and our prayers go out to the people involved. Was at a Planned Parenthood, so of course there's politics.
Right.
Immediately.
Well, any mass shooting these days tends to involve politics.
Yeah, but now put it at an abortion clinic.
Exactly. It's a clash of. Well, this will get me in trouble.
Uh-oh. No.
I'll hold my thought.
Yeah, he's just going to hold that thought. But there were many calls online for calling Christians hypocrites for demanding that moderate Muslims renounce ISIS terrorism, but Christians aren't renouncing this guy shooting up an abortion clinic, which, first of all, I don't think he's claimed that he's a Christian. I find it kind of interesting in the desire to make this an apples-to-apples comparison, because this is obviously a lone crazy guy. Now, clearly, though, he's picked up on because he had talked about no more baby parts,
Right.
was his quote that made people think, aha, this was ideological. And apparently it was ideological. It appears to have been ideological.
We'll know more as things come out.
In the sense of that he was an idiot, and this was his ology.
Okay.
Did you see what I did there?
I do. That's great. You're an ideologist.
Yeah, exactly. But my concern, and I think, as a Christian, my concern is that we have to be careful when we have ideological enemies, how much we demonize them. Because whenever you turn someone, or an idea or a person or an institution into a demon, then there's always people that want to go kill the demon. And some people take that more literally than others because of their state of mind.
Yeah.
And this guy had been living in a cabin in the woods for years by himself, and you get a little weird.
To your point, Martin Luther King used to quote another philosopher quite regularly when he was speaking about why segregation and racial prejudice was wrong. And he said the reason it's fundamentally wrong is because it transforms the I-thou relationship to an I-it relationship, which is another way of saying rather than respecting another person as a fellow human being, you see them as an object, as a thing, and sometimes as an obstacle.
As an opponent.
Well, not even an opponent can be human, but once you diminish their value to the point where they are nothing more than an obstacle, then you can justify all kinds of horrible
obstacles are not human.
Right. So the I-thou idea is I'm a human, you're a human. We may disagree, but
Wouldn't you like to be a human too?
Right. Hey, I have Dr. Pepper right here. There's a product placement.
He's selling Dr. Pepper as we speak.
But the I-it relationship brings with it all kinds of horrible things. This is what Jesus forbid in like Luke 6, where he talks about do not judge and you will not be judged. Don't condemn, you will not be condemned. It's that I-it relationship. So in our political rhetoric on both sides, we have so demonized the other that, especially in the mind of somebody who's mentally ill, it becomes justifiable to kill other people because they're seen as less than human. They're an obstacle to the way the world should be. This is what ISIS does, and this is what...
this is one of the great themes of the 20th century in the politics and the revolutions throughout the world was our opponents are less than human, and therefore we are justified in the name of our ideology to do whatever needs to be done to preserve the ideology.
And the irony is the very values that drive so many people who are pro-life in valuing the human life that is unborn.
People, right? We value people.
Exactly.
Right?
Is exactly why we must condemn any kind of attack like this on an abortion clinic.
Right. But even more so, how do we continue to fight against, because the leaders of Planned Parenthood are saying, well, this is where your poisonous rhetoric goes when you oppose abortion, which obviously you can't then say, so we can't oppose any cause. We can't oppose anything we disagree with.
Well, they're obviously...
because somebody might take it too far.
What's really sad is they're using this tragedy as an opportunity to claim victimhood. And bolster their fundraising, attack their political opponents, and it happens in every sad tragedy.
We would never do that, would we?
No, never. Christians would never do that.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
But what I'm as sad and horrible and tragic as this is, what I am fascinated by is to see how the culture reacts to this, because what you have is a clash of, one way of putting it is the sacrament of the left with abortion and the sacrament of the right in gun rights. and there are two things that people feel so strongly about on both sides, and there should be no limitation on gun ownership and no limitation on abortion. And here you have these two deeply held sacred political realities clashing with each other, and how it all unfolds, especially in an election year.
My gun rights just bumped into your abortion rights.
Exactly.
That's basically what happened in Colorado. So what do we do? I have to be Christian. So how does it affect me, Skye?
Well, to get a little political for a minute, both of these issues fundamentally intersect with the Christian sanctity of life issue.
How so, Skye?
If you believe in the sanctity of life, how does that apply then to the abortion issue? And if you believe in the sanctity of life, how does that relate to the proliferation of firearms?
We need more firearms to defend our sanctity of our lives.
Right. Something like that.
Okay. Speaking of all that, you also you wrote something on our own Facebook page.
I did.
Something almost blog length.
Right. I decided instead of short, brief responses to various Facebook things, I would just make one larger one and put it up and kind of be done. For that moment, anyway.
Okay, and it was an interesting week in Chicago last week.
It was.
We had protests and marches over the shooting of, what's his name? You actually knew his name.
Yes, I'm blanking on it right now. Look it up.
He was not an unarmed black youth, but he just had a small knife.
He had a small knife, and this happened. This is the weird part. There's many horrible things about this, but it happened 13 months ago.
Yeah.
And
it took a while.
Very clear footage of an officer shooting this young man.
But it wasn't released.
Right.
It wasn't released.
But there was clear footage of him shooting this young man 16 times.
Yes.
And
10 times while he was on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
that's like the literal definition of overkill.
I think so.
So anyway, the controversy has multiple facets. One is obviously the actions of the police officer himself, and were they or were they not justifiable? It seems pretty clear they were not. But then secondly,
he's been charged with murder.
Right, but was there a conspiracy to keep this footage out of the public eyes? And why did it take 13 months to prosecute him and indict him for murder? And the theory is that it was a political cover-up because it was an election year in Chicago for mayor, Rahm Emanuel running for re-election.
Yeah.
And the thought was that if this story came out and the footage was released, it would create all kinds of turmoil for the election. So it's not only another case of a police officer shooting a relatively unarmed young black man, but a case of perhaps more Chicago political corruption. And the whole thing just reeks of horribleness and highlights, again, ongoing issues of violence, firearms, racial injustice, the Black Lives Matter movement.
Do you think the police have too many firearms?
No, I think what this does highlight, though, is the ongoing rift that I've spoken to friends of mine, even here in Chicago, about the profound rift between many communities and the police and the lack of trust that exists there. And then you add, of course, a racial overlay on the whole thing, and it makes it even worse.
Why couldn't, especially in a place like Chicago that's so, the neighborhoods are so ethnic, so it's not a melting pot. Chicago is not a melting pot.
It's like a salad bar.
It's this part is white, or upper class, Asian, Jewish. Then this part's Hispanic and black, and then this part's just black. Why couldn't we police more with people from those neighborhoods? That's kind of what because it's when you're other, to break down the otherness. Because there was a tradition in New York that the police were all Irish.
Right.
Hey, that's not a traditional Irish guy. The New York cop was an Irish guy. And in Chicago, it's the white guy with the mustache who talks, the South Side thing.
Well, I don't know the percentages, but there's a lot of non-white Chicago police officers. I saw an Indian police officer in Chicago not that long ago.
So do you think, would it work better if there was a more intentional effort to police with common ethnic background?
That would probably help, but I don't think that's the core issue.
What's the core issue?
Who am I? But I think one of the core issues is there is this fundamental breakdown of trust. Police officers in many communities are not known by the community. There isn't a relationship. There isn't a rapport. They don't live in the community.
They don't live there.
And so when a crime happens in some of these neighborhoods, even the citizens there who are victimized don't think to call the police, because they don't trust the police. They don't think they're on their side.
But what comes first, the trust or the violence?
Well, I think if you have to build trust, and this is a basic leadership principle. If there is no trust, nothing happens.
Right.
It's the lubricant of civilization. There has to be trust in order for anything to move.
Would you want to be? See, I'm wondering if it's going to be harder and harder, especially if there's more prosecution of police for incidents, if it will be harder to actually get people to want to police in very dangerous high crime areas.
Right. Well,
because it's a very difficult situation to be in.
And this is what is kind of troubling about the current movement. I mean, on one level, yes, if there are these horrible incidents of police shooting unarmed people, like what happened in South Carolina that was caught on video, and now this one in Chicago, if those things are happening, they're evil and wrong and criminal and need to be prosecuted. But the more and more of those stories that come out, you're eroding more and more of the trust.
Right.
So it feels a little bit to me like the child abuse sex scandals that have rocked the Catholic Church, where on one level, these are horrible crimes that need to be prosecuted and brought out into the light, but to prevent them in the future, you also need to develop new systems of trust, new accountability, and restoring that, it takes a long time.
That's hard.
It is. It's hard. It's horrible.
That's hard.
But it's not going to stop if we don't look at what's causing this in the first place. Of course we can solve it.
You and I?
Not by ourselves.
Okay.
But as John F. Kennedy used to say, our problems are made by man and they can be solved by man.
You would think, though, with so many smart people working on it, we would be doing better. I mean, what police department doesn't have people advising them on race relations and community policing and neighborhood policing.
Well, and there's deeper
Why?
systemic issues. I mean, you pointed out the segregation of Chicago and the neighborhoods to begin with. I mean, that goes back hundreds of years into the, and it leads to really bad environments. And you have, in some of these communities, total breakdown of family structure and institutional engagement, churches, schools, civic responsibility. When all of that deteriorates in a community, and what you're left with is only the police keeping a lid on the chaos,
on human behavior.
you're expecting a police force to do more than it was intended to do.
Right. I know, and then it becomes more of a military state. And this is why to me it seems like America is choosing a strange form of apartheid where, if you look at South Africa, okay, the African population was told, you have to live together over here, and we are going to police you. And if you don't stay in line, we're going to police you brutally. And you can't have these jobs, and you can't have this education, and you can't. Now, we're not doing any of that by fiat, but it seems that the same thing is happening.
Through economics.
Through zoning, through soft means of, and even some self-selection where people like to live, where they grew up or in areas where you feel like you fit in. But that we're ending up with the same result of, all right, you people, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes if you're listening, all live over there, and we will police you, and it's going to get more like a military state, a military form of police. Because there's just the assumption is if I walk into that neighborhood, I might get shot at, so I have to go in there like I'm going to war.
And we tolerate anything that happens in that neighborhood because it's like, well, that's
them.
That's what's supposed to happen.
That's them.
This is one of the things
there.
that's really kind of annoying me. Not annoying me. It's painful to see. But there was wall-to-wall coverage of what happened in Paris a few weeks ago. And I get it. I understand it was a brutal attack. It was horrible. It was a close ally. It was a Western country. It was a predominantly white country. We identify with that country more, so you get this wall-to-wall coverage.
We all intend to go to Paris, even if we haven't gone to Paris.
Perhaps.
Few of us intend to go to Beirut.
Well, you don't intend to go to Paris because you don't go over water. Anyway.
I'm not very travel-y.
So, we get wall-to-wall coverage on that, but we don't get wall-to-wall coverage on the constant day in and day out violence that just permeates many communities and cities in our own country. It's a form of domestic violence and domestic terrorism that we just say, well, that's normal. That's supposed to happen. That's the narrative that we're used to, so we don't
say
pay
it's
attention.
Supposed to happen.
Well, we say
there's nothing I can do about it.
Well, either that or it's just the way it's always been.
Well, yeah, or you like the Middle East, as Palestinians going at it with the Israelis, and we say, well, that's just happened.
And the saddest thing is when you normalize that kind of thing, then there's no real drive to change it.
Right.
It's how it's supposed to be. People, okay, fine, that's the west side of Chicago. That's the south side of Chicago. It's how it's always been. It's how it's always going to be. Well, if that's the attitude, it never changes. And that's why I was actually really grateful and happy to see those protesters on Michigan Avenue on Black Friday. Because I think it took an issue that we've tried to push aside to the west side or the south side and stuck it right in the economic heart of Chicago.
Messed up my shopping experience.
Which is exactly what
Skye.
you have to do. You have to hit the economic realities of our society in order to wake people up to the moral realities of our society.
Wow.
There you go.
Are you pro boycott?
Sometimes.
Or boycott?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I mean, the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, 1956, the reason it was effective wasn't because Rosa Parks wouldn't give up her seat.
Yeah.
It was because it started impacting the economics of that city and the bus company owners. And again, Martin Luther King was shrewd enough to realize that you can't just appeal to people's moral fiber, you have to appeal to their pocketbook.
Right. Do you know the Dred Scott case that where the Supreme Court 1860, 56, something like that?
Are you on Wikipedia? How are you pulling these things out?
where it was before the Civil War, not long before the Civil War, where the Supreme Court said we will not even take a case brought by a person of African origin because they are property and therefore do not have citizenship and therefore cannot bring a case to court.
Right. You have to be an actual person.
Yes,
right.
You have to be a person to be represented in the federal courts.
So you can be a corporation and be heard in a
Yes.
federal court,
But
but not an actual human being.
Do you know who brought that case? Do you know who was behind? What instigated it was the ruling in Louisiana or Mississippi, I forget which, that blacks and whites could not share rail cars, street cars.
Right.
They had to be on separate cars. And so Dred Scott, the guy, was sent in specifically to make the case happen. You're going to go in that car. You're going to be arrested, and we're going to... Do you know who was behind it?
Al Sharpton.
The streetcar companies.
Oh.
Do you know why? They didn't want to have to buy more streetcars.
There you go.
It was economic. It was like, come on, if we have to have separate streetcars on every train
Right.
for different races, we have to buy 320 more streetcars. Can't we just have different parts of the same streetcar? And it was economics that drove... Ultimately, that failed and ended up with what is widely considered the worst Supreme Court decision of all time, unless you consider Roe v. Wade, that, or Oglflugern, the one about same-sex marriage.
Ogenfell.
Ogerbergernflugern.
Something.
Ogerflugern, which is what they call a hamburger in IKEA. Okay, so last week we talked about... Have you ever had a hamburger in IKEA?
No, don't they? They do not have hamburgers
It's just
in
one
IKEA.
big meatball. just a
roll.
A meatball on a bun. Several of our listeners piped up about a few things we said last week. Greg Johnson, who said he's Woody from Cheers.
Oh, I was going to say from Toy Story.
No, not Toy Story. We did not ask people to name which Pixar character they were. We said which Cheers character.
Right.
So that's Woody Harrelson. Because
Right.
his name in the show wasn't Woody.
Right.
What was his name in the show?
It was Woody.
In the show?
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson's character name was Woody?
Yes.
I didn't remember that. While some recent campus protests are either incoherent or very poorly reported, there are very real injustices out there, like the pandemic of violence against unarmed black men that Black Lives Matter tries to draw attention to. Which is tricky because Black Lives Matter has become very controversial.
Yeah, but I don't... Is it legitimately controversial, or is it just being... I think the media is trying to create a narrative that Black Lives Matters is anti-police.
Well,
And because it creates tension that gets people to watch TV.
but it's not it's too diverse a movement to say, so many people can speak for Black Lives. It was like the 99% thing.
The Wall Street.
Yeah, the Occupy Wall Street
yeah.
thing, where there was no cohesion, so you couldn't
Right.
say, well, this is what they want.
It isn't like they had a media spokesperson that you could go to
So
get...
there have been people who have said, really terrible, aggressive things against police.
Right, but that doesn't...
Under the heading Black Lives Matter, or with that tweet, but that doesn't mean that's what the movement is.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Just like Franklin Graham can say horrible things about Muslims, but that doesn't mean that's what all Christians think.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because when he says something, my first thought is, I guess that's what I think. Because I'm a Christian too. And he is Billy Graham's son.
He's like our Pope.
He's the Popeson.
The Pope what?
Popeson. If your last name is Popeson, that means you were the son of the Pope in England.
If you were the son of the Pope, then there are other issues.
If you were the son of the Pope. Has any Pope ever had a son?
Yes. There was a time in the Catholic Church when clergy were not celibate.
Okay, but since then, you should make a movie about the son of the Pope, who the whole world denies.
I think son of the Pope is a better name than Popeson.
Paul Popeson. That's his name. That's his name. He works at an ad agency in Manhattan.
Paul Popeson the 23rd.
Yeah, he's kind of a lovable loser. He works at an ad agency, and he knows that no one else knows that the Pope is his father. And he sets out on a mission to prove it against all odds.
Like he's trying to get a genetic sample from the Pope to do a paternity test.
Exactly.
And it ends with them on Maury Povich.
The movie is called The Piety of Paul Popeson. Thank you.
The piety or the paternity?
Oh, that would work too.
Yeah.
The paella.
The Pope's paternity.
The Pope, maybe he's Spanish and it's the paella.
My goodness.
John Golden says, my wife says I might be Coach. I had forgotten all about Coach. Do you remember?
Yeah, he was Eddie. Was it?
I don't know.
He was the guy who died, and then Woody came in.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, okay. I think I'm Norm. He thinks he's Norm. Be careful about the whole grit narrative, John says. It's used to suggest that minority kids aren't succeeding because of lack of effort. And Duckworth, the grit woman, her own grit story is troublesome, and there has been some blog posts about that, where they say, and you need to defend this because you were Mr. Grit last week. You were Gritson, son of Grit.
Son of Grit.
To the sequel. That Duckworth actually started out her first 5 years were teaching science and math in inner city schools and wondering why the kids were failing, and that was the source of some of her grit theorizing, which has been used then to label inner city kids as opposed to, of course, successful white children who are so full of grit.
Clearly
Full of
the suburbs just breed grit.
Well, football? I don't know. There's some grit on the football field.
That's gridiron.
Gridiron. Ooh, our next film. They were lining up the movies rapidly. So, response? Do you think,
the idea you can't overplay any of these issues. Obviously, let's go back. If you
tell that to Donald Trump.
Yeah, if you go back to what's it called? Segregation. Jim Crow.
Oh, yeah, that.
All that. I don't care how much grit you had as an African-American kid in the South, you had very limited opportunity because of societal injustice. So no amount of grit is going to solve that. What is that?
Right. Ooh, that was pretty.
I got an eBay notice.
Something came out of Taco the Bell.
Yeah.
Taco the Bell just died and went to heaven.
So yes, there are other considerations. You can't boil every success story down merely to grit. There are things like opportunities and
grit is defined as resiliency.
Exactly.
For the most part, tenacity and resiliency.
But I would guess that even within a community that is highly impoverished or systemically persecuted, that even within that community, the individuals with more grit are going to persevere and do better than those without it.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that grit isn't a legitimate issue. It's just you can't put every success story down to grit.
So grit, good.
Yes.
Grit as singular factor behind everyone's success or failure, bad.
That would be an overstatement.
That would be an overstatement. Right. Okay. Solomon says, you remember Solomon?
Sure.
Our good friend Solomon?
He's dressed
Solomon forgot
beautifully
to say which Cheers cast member he is. So I'm tempted to just throw out his remarks.
Shelley Long.
Solomon says, I'm coming by with some Chick-fil-A and try to lure you guys down off the porch again. Look, old people complaining about how the youth are different than them is a tired shtick. The only difference between the gritless of today and the gritless of your day is that today they've utilized social media to become more visible. There are still plenty of young men and women in the hard sciences doing the hard work of earning a marketable degree and skills. And having been a somewhat recent college graduate myself, I can tell you that all this stuff reported by the right-wing media about how kids have no grit is a bunch of overblown horse poop. That's like blaming all Muslims for terrorism. It's simply not reflective of reality. Darn it. I'm banging my fist on the desk.
Solomon, fair enough. It's always bad.
Solomon says we got plenty of grit.
Well, here's the thing.
Look, we have kids in college.
I would argue that as a Gen Xer, my generation, myself included, has far less grit than my grandparents, who endured the Great Depression and World War II and all kinds of other things.
So you're not just throwing the younger generation under the bus.
Not at all. I'm saying
you are lying under the bus. Yourself.
I was hit by that bus years ago. I'm still bloodied and laying on the ditch in the side of the road.
The Gritless Express.
Yes. So
new musical.
The point is there are some historical and societal circumstances that can create more grit within a generation than in others. And even in my parents' generation, there was Vietnam, there was the civil rights movement, and depending on your circumstances and experiences, that can also have led to a lot more sense of perseverance and struggle.
Right.
And
right.
and frankly, our generation, I think, if we have grit, most of that was probably developed through domestic struggles of parents who broke up, of abuse and other sorts of things that may have happened, which I'm not saying these are good things. They're difficult, horrible, sometimes evil things.
Or having to work at McDonald's. Isn't that a source of grit?
It's a source of grease.
It's not a source of grits. That's Waffle House.
So part of it is, I mean, just historically, the current generation of young adults, 25 or under, whatever the millennial breakoff point is, have in general lived in the most luxurious, comfortable, least stressful environment of any generation of Americans in recent history. And that has to be considered.
So comfort is a solvent for grit. Like gas, it dissolves it.
What? Grits give you gas?
No, gasoline is a solvent.
Right.
You can dissolve all sorts of things with gasoline. Water is a solvent for some things. Sugar, for example, dissolves in water. Water is a solvent. Grit dissolves in comfort.
I wouldn't say that entirely. I'd say too much. Neil Postman he wrote Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Yes.
Remember that book?
And The Disappearance of Childhood.
Right.
One of my
and he
favorite
talks
books.
about how comfort is not feeling good. Comfort is feeling nothing at all.
Oh.
So, yeah, there is a sense that if you numb yourself with constant comforts, air quotes again, you can lose
Your
that.
grit dissolves.
Your grit dissolves. But that doesn't mean comfort doesn't have a useful role. I mean,
so we need to make our kids less comfortable.
I think we need to.
What are you doing to make your kids less comfortable?
Pretty much my presence always makes them less comfortable. Well, it's stupid.
I took my daughter's phone away last night.
We did
You're going
too.
to bed now. You have no phone.
Oh, we took our daughter's phone away all day. Because I flew.
Wow, that's really uncomfortable.
Well, I came home last night around 7:30. I flew in from elsewhere,
Omaha.
And
Was that a secret? I'm not supposed to.
It's. I'm a secret agent in Omaha.
Skye was in Omaha. He's been stalking Warren Buffett.
A double agent. Anyway, I walked into the house, and you catch up on what happened this weekend and what are the kids up to and everything. And my oldest daughter had her phone taken away for something that happened yesterday. So that's like a regular leverage point.
That's why we have grit, because our phones were never given to us.
That's right.
When we were that age.
We actually had to pick up wired phones and call somebody.
I had to whittle a phone out of a board, out of a plank of wood, and imagine that I was playing Angry Birds. That's how you build
grit.
Now, my grandfather worked in his father's greenhouses 40 hours a day.
Wait a minute. Greenhouses?
Yeah.
What did your grandfather? Your grandfather was a pastor.
Wrong side of the family.
Oh.
Wrong side of the family.
Okay. The Vischer side.
Yes, the Vischer side. The Germans came from Germany. Hothouse farmer in Toledo had 7 acres under glass.
Of what?
Tomatoes, cucumbers, like half the produce for Toledo, Ohio in the wintertime came from my great-grandfather's hothouse farms. They burned...
Is that what they were called? Hothouse?
Yeah, he was a hothouse farmer.
Usually I don't associate good things with Germans and hothouses.
Oh, I think that was inappropriate.
I just hadn't heard the term before.
Yeah, it's a hothouse. It's a greenhouse.
Okay.
Yeah. So they had to burn a full railroad car full of coal every day to keep all of the hothouses.
So we have your family to blame for global warming.
Global warming, that was me. Yeah. But so my grandpa grew up working in the greenhouses. When they sold the greenhouse and bought a farm up in rural Michigan, which we still have in the family, he was given the assignment by his dad. There was like a 100-foot tall smokestack for the boilers on the property. My grandfather, he's a teenager. Okay, this is what he did when he was a teenager. His dad said, "You get the job of bringing down that smokestack. And your payment is, after you've brought it down, hopefully safely, you can clean and sell all the brick."
Nice.
And he did. That's what my grit.
That's grit. That's brick grit.
Bringing down a chimney that's a 10-story building and then cleaning all the brick and selling it.
I have a feeling right now Solomon is totally rolling his eyes about
Solomon,
2 old men grumbling about how
kids these days. When I wasn't even born, things were so much better. Which Cheers character complained the most?
Who complained the most? Probably Frazier.
Yep, that's me again.
Yeah.
I said I was Frazier last week. Okay, no longer content to persecute Muslims, the governor of Texas has added Christians to the list of folks on the persecuted list. Get a load of this.
Can't wait.
This is actually a blog post written by Benjamin Corey on Patheos.com, a Christian blog post. As you know, Texas is one of the states who have barred Syrian refugees from settling within its borders. Regardless of how one feels about this, the people of Jesus have a different responsibility. We have the responsibility to help the sojourner among us. We welcome the stranger, clothe the naked, and give food to the hungry. That's an essential core identity of being Christian. And here's how the Texas decision has now turned into a real deal case of anti-Christian persecution. Instead of saying the state of Texas won't accept refugees, but allowing citizens of Texas to freely practice their religion in spite of the government decision, Governor Greg Abbott has ordered Christian ministries to immediately cease and desist giving aid to refugees. Governor Abbott sent a letter out to local organizations such as Catholic Charities, ordering them to stop serving Syrian refugees, or else their programs would be at risk.
Wait a minute. Back up for a second.
Yeah.
It's one thing for the governor to say, we're not going to accept any Syrian refugees.
Yeah.
It's another thing, though, to say, don't even help them.
Yeah.
Like, so is he saying Christian ministries, you can't even help these refugees resettle somewhere else or give them supplies or food or medicine? Or is that what he's saying?
You don't feed them. Yeah.
Even if you're not resettling them in Texas, like, don't help them in any way.
Well, I don't know about that. I think they'd have to be in Texas to be helped by the charities in Texas. But
Okay.
if they were in a different state, that's one thing. But if they're in Texas, now no Christian organization is supposed to help them.
But isn't it enough to just say, as the governor, we're not taking any of these people? Do you have to then go further and say, and anyone who does help these people? You know, isn't it redundant?
One would not think you would have to go further than that. One would not think that. That means the state is not going to help refugees. Obviously.
Yeah, but he's saying we will not allow any of these people into our state. And I'm assuming there's a little debate.
Maybe there are already some there.
Well, there's a debate between states' rights and federal rights on who has immigration authority here. We've been down that road before. But if they're already there, how can you not help them?
Here's what Ben Corey says. Here's the deal, folks. I've outright mocked some of the anti-Christian persecution claims over the years because 99% of the time they are absurd. But this case, the governor of a state strong-arming Christian charities, demanding they stop doing the very things Jesus ordered them to do, this is a real deal case of anti-Christian persecution. This is a clear case of the government ordering a set of people to stop practicing the tenets of their religion. And the government is Texas, and the governor is a Christian. So Ben's going off the deep end about that.
So what do you think?
Yeah. Did you hear Stephen Colbert respond to the Syrian
I didn't.
immigrant issue?
I haven't watched him in a while.
Oh, it was good. Here, I'll pull it up. I have the dialogue. Here's what he said. Okay, so Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush both suggested that Christian refugees don't pose any danger. Later, Bush said that he would have that they should only let Christian Syrian refugees in.
And how do you know that?
Bush said it would be easy. You can prove that you're Christian. And then a reporter said, how? Mm-hmm. And he said, I think you can just prove it. And turned and walked away from the reporter.
That sounds more like a Donald Trump answer.
So Stephen Colbert played that clip and then said, I know how you prove you're a Christian. You finish this line. I was a stranger and you welcomed me, or it did that whole verse. You know, I was
Matthew 25.
I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and then he paused and said, if they don't say welcome me in, they are either a terrorist or they are running for president. So,
way to go, Stephen.
Yeah.
He's kind of our pop culture theologian now, isn't he?
He is. I mean, he is the only one who has earned the right to quote Jesus extensively
and not be mocked for it.
Yes, on network television and be listened to.
Yeah.
Actually listened to, because people take him seriously because they don't know how serious he is about religion.
Yeah, I think it's also because he has his liberal creds, exactly.
Yes.
So that, if you're liberal, you're okay doing that, especially if you're quoting passages of scripture that kind of reinforce liberal ideals.
Right. He also had Bill Maher on the show.
I saw that.
Did you see that
I
one?
did see that.
He invited him back to the church.
Right.
That was very funny.
It was.
If you haven't seen that, Google or go to YouTube and just type Stephen Colbert, Bill Maher.
And I'm sure somebody will post it on your Facebook page.
Someone probably will. It ended up being a 16-minute interview that they had to cut down to 8 minutes for the show.
Do they have the unedited version?
Yes.
Oh, I haven't seen that part.
They have the whole thing, which is quite interesting. Okay, this is a story that Skye Jethani sent in.
Oh.
Do you know?
Actually, my brother sent this to me first.
Your brother sent this in? And this is followed by a story that my brother sent in.
Well, there you go. We should have a brother's podcast.
Which is related. When some turn to church, others go to CrossFit. People looking at gyms like CrossFit or other experiences as church alternatives, and what's the difference between being a huge fan of a health community and being a member of a religious group?
Actually, what's interesting is this is an article in the New York Times about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine downtown Chicago, and he's the first one who told me that the whole CrossFit thing is truly a religion.
Really?
And that a lot of the young adults in his church, like their entire identity and life community is centered around CrossFit. And so he got involved in it just as a way of trying to reach out to these people.
And now he's become a CrossFitian instead of a Christian?
Yeah, something. He's like a fitness guru.
A for-profit gym franchise founded in 2000 that now has 13,000 licensed operators serving at least 2 million customers. CrossFit, like television, sports fandom, and health fads, has become the focus of study by researchers trying to pinpoint what exactly constitutes religiosity in America.
This is something we've been asking on the podcast for a long time. How do you define a religion?
And people make fun of some of the things that people get away with in the name of religion, precisely because we can't define it.
Right.
Legally. I mean, it's the courts will not define it. It's surprisingly hard to say what makes a religion. Any criteria you choose to define religion will quickly reveal its shortcomings. Is it about belief in a deity? Judaism and Christianity have that, but many varieties of Buddhism do not. Existence after death. Mormons believe that, but plenty of liberal Protestants do not. Ooh, take that, liberal Protestants. You and the Sadducees.
Right.
They didn't believe in that either. Yeah. Yet consider football. Religion scholars have noted that it brings people together in large crowds to worship and has a weekly holy day and even annual holidays like NFL Draft Day and, of course, the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. It is a cult.
But, okay, Joseph L. Price teaches religion and pop culture at Whittier College in California, says, to him, the key criterion is whether a given activity establishes a worldview. To what extent is the worldview of the CrossFitters
Yeah, you get it?
Yeah. Oh, I'm a CrossFitter.
You're a cross-dresser.
That's funny. To what extent is the worldview of the CrossFitters determined by their practices, their aspirations for the perfect body, or for the most fit male or female in the world? Does their aspiration for fitness shape their view of how their world is ordered and organized? Using this logic, one can see how Star Trek fans, with their deep interest in science and cosmology, might qualify as religious. But members of a men's breakfast club who meet weekly at a diner, by contrast, while they might derive great joy and comfort from the ritual, would not be religious.
I always find it interesting when people say that they do something religiously, like I work out religiously, or because
that means regularly.
I know, but it's funny because so many people in the church don't do religious things religiously.
Ooh.
You look at average church attendance or reading of scripture.
We're not religious about our religion.
Right.
What's it mean, Skye?
Well, there are some people who, for example, watch NFL games or college football more faithfully than they engage scripture or go to church. So which one is really their religion?
Well, which one orders their worldview?
Right. It's where do you get your worldview, your sense of identity
Yeah.
and purpose and belonging.
Yeah.
And if it's more from being a Packers fan or a Bears fan
what about this?
Michigan fan.
What about this? Where do you look for answers to ultimate questions? Is that a good test of religion?
But see, I think you're saying the same thing, though, because ultimate questions are like, who am I?
Yeah.
Why am I here?
I'm a Packers fan.
Right.
I'm here to watch the Packers.
If you ask somebody in a survey, what is your ultimate destiny, they might put down a theological answer like I will be in heaven with God or something like that. But if you ask them day in and day out, what gives you a sense of meaning? I think a lot of people would say
the Food Channel.
I find more meaning in my work or a sporting activity or working out.
Is religion wherever we find meaning? Is that what you're saying the definition is?
It can be, yeah. And especially when groups gather together around that shared meaning and establish shared practices and rituals.
Right.
You've got a religion.
See, now this is where it gets a little weird, and I think that kind of test would actually work to our advantage. This is the article my brother sent in.
It's a duel of whose brother sent in the better article.
Woman allowed to wear spaghetti strainer in Massachusetts driver's license photo.
I win. My genetic pool is better than yours.
Well, he's very busy. He's a very important law school dean. A woman who identifies herself as a Pastafarian, a follower of a religion that teaches that an airborne spaghetti monster could have created the universe, has succeeded in her bid to wear a colander on her head in her driver's license photo. She's actually not the first. It's happened in England as well.
Well, it's England.
Yeah. Lindsay Miller claims the spaghetti strainer is a sign of her devotion to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Wait a minute. Let me see the picture.
There she is, wearing her colander on her head.
And what state is this?
Massachusetts.
Oh, well. It's New England. It's just like the UK, only
it's
different accent.
Old England. Yeah, I don't know that would work in Texas necessarily. But here's the deal. Okay. The Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is a parody church. I mean, the Flying Spaghetti Monster started as a joke
so did Dianetics and Scientology.
They didn't start as jokes.
I think it did.
I don't think so.
I think it was L. Ron Hubbard saying, "I could fabricate a religion."
Well,
no problem. It was like over a dinner party or something.
So long
because it worked and it made tons of money.
Okay, maybe. Well, the Flying Spaghetti Monster is an atheist argument to say, why don't I believe in God? Well, why don't you believe in the Flying Spaghetti Monster? Because there's zero evidence of it. That's why, and that's why I don't believe in God. So they're saying that you don't have to prove, you can't prove a negative.
Right.
You can't prove God doesn't exist. I can't prove God doesn't exist. You can't prove the Flying Spaghetti Monster doesn't exist. So it makes just as much sense to worship the Flying Spaghetti Monster as it does God.
Right.
So that is a logical rebuttal to an argument for belief in God.
Right.
That's not a religion. Now, fans of that idea have started promoting it, saying, hey, let's start a church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster because that's funny.
Right.
And that's where
it's a mockery of religion.
It seems like you would have the ability to say, this is not a religion. You don't actually believe.
Well, what they do actually believe is that religion is ridiculous, and the way they and the way they choose to express that shared belief is through wearing a colander on their head. So there's a shared ritual and symbol there.
Yeah, but they don't have a worldview that's ordered by the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
No, but they have a worldview that's represented by the Flying Spaghetti Monster. A worldview that is naturalistic and anti-supernatural and anti-religion that happens to be... When you see that Flying Spaghetti Monster thing on the back of someone's car, that is their way of identifying, I am not religious, and beyond that, I think religion is stupid.
So it's a symbol of a naturalistic worldview
yes.
or an anti-theistic worldview.
And now they've coalesced around that identity. And there you go.
Okay, so then couldn't you have your driver's license picture taken with anything on your head?
Exactly, yes.
Then with a Chewbacca mask, with an atheist
in the UK, to go back to that, they have officially recognized Jedi Knight as a religion, and there was a case a couple years ago of people dressing like Jedi and going into grocery stores and things, and the store owners saying, no, you got to take off your hoods because we have this policy, blah, blah, blah. And they took that to the courts and said, no, this is my religion. I should be allowed to wear a Jedi hood, which actually really annoys me about the prequels. Have you ever realized?
Wait, what?
Okay, we got to go on a little Star Wars tangent here.
We're running out of time, but I'm sure this will be valuable.
In the original Star Wars movie,
Did this come from your brother?
No, A New Hope, 1977. Luke and Uncle Owen and Obi-Wan all wear those kind of Arab-looking robe clothes because they live on Tatooine.
Right.
They're not Jedi outfits.
Right.
They're just Tatooine robes, right? Including Uncle Owen, who's just a moisture farmer.
Yeah, he's just a nerf herder.
Right. And then later on in Return of the Jedi and in Empire Strikes Back, Luke has other outfits on. Like in Jedi, he wears that black kind of priestly-looking thing, right?
Right. That's right.
But then you go to the prequels, Episode 1.
And they're all wearing robes.
And they're all wearing Tatooine robes because apparently someone decided that's going to be an official Jedi uniform. But it makes no sense.
Yeah, and it's hard to lightsaber fight when a swirly robe.
Well, they throw the robes off to be dramatic sometimes. But still, it's dumb because it's not a Jedi outfit.
And you go to a rain planet and one of those robes gets soaked with water.
Yeah, there should be no official Jedi uniform. That's ridiculous. They should be like ninja that just kind of blend in with society and whatever.
I'm glad we found something that you feel really strongly about.
I do. Anyway, the colander picture, people should look this up because it's a little creepy.
Yeah, Massachusetts woman wearing spaghetti strainer. Google it.
Her name is Lindsay Miller.
Lindsay M. Miller. We do not know how tall she is or how much she weighs because those parts were redacted.
So, did this go to court? Is that why?
Yeah, she was refused at first.
Okay.
And so she won the right to have her picture taken with her spaghetti strainer. And now she is a happy Pastafarian. On behalf of Pastafarians everywhere. What rhymes with Pastafarian besides Rastafarian, which is to...
Mandalorian.
Maybe we're taking it a little too farian to say that even a Pastafarian can have his picture taken with a hat of his own religious choice. Religious freedom. Hey, it's great. It should happen in every state. But if it's a joke, I don't think it's as awesome for making fun of others, like your sisters and your brothers, or your poor old Catholic mother. Tell her her beliefs are very dumb. And Texas, lay off the craziness about the Syrian immigrants. Okay. See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.